I'm very pleased now to introduce our next session of the day. It's entitled Hearing What Your Customer Wants. And the session will be moderated by Damian Slattery. Damian is VP Marketing at Fast Company, and I will turn it over to Damian to introduce the rest of this wonderful panel. Welcome, Damian and the panelists.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. We're thrilled to be here. Come on in, Myriam, Steve. This is Myriam, that's Steve, that's Amy, that's Victor, and there's Laura. We're going to cut to the chase here with questions. I just wanted to, this is about hearing and listening. Who heard Nick at the start say Lodestar? Yeah, okay. Well, there you have it. A few people were listening. Yes, I work at Fast Company now, and we were built for the speed economy almost 25 years ago. And so today we are going to think fast, be fast, and speak fast. My table mates, Brianna, Melissa, Megan, and Max, all were desperate to listen and hear what these people had to say. So I think we've got a blend of science, heart, art here, people who listen to their customers, to their employees, who understand the technology of listening, who understand how to activate and take action and build strategy around listening. So we're gonna, without further ado, I'm gonna ask them to kind of introduce themselves as I answer our questions rather than go through. So in listening, Steve, of Future Labs, right? So what are the technologies and tactics today? How do people listen? How are companies listening? How are you helping people listen from the academic incubator, develop programs, companies, and tactics?
Sure. So, I mean, a lot of it has to do with certain technologies that are now available, access to data, access to certain back-end processes. I think the whole concept of listening to customers came from the startup ecosystem. Startups couldn't compete with these large incumbents, so they knew that they needed to create the best possible product. The way you do that is you listen to your customers and you pivot your product so that it's more relevant to the market, more relevant to customers. So what we do is we help our companies create a culture internally of understanding that what they're building is a hobby unless there's people that are out there that are willing to buy it. So we work really hard on helping them understand how to do customer validation, market validation, how to build an internal culture of a team where they listen to their customers before developing a product. There's a great story about Airbnb that they used to have a phone, a red phone within their engineering team, and the red phone was a customer service call. The reason they wanted to do that is they wanted the people who were building the software to listen to the customers. So that sort of mentality has propagated within the startup ecosystem, and has, over the last couple of years, has sort of broken through to larger companies who understand that knowing your customers is as important as the products you develop. This whole notion of building things and then selling it through resellers and third parties and channel partners may still be in existence in a couple of years, but if you don't know who your end customers are, you don't know whether or not what you're building is going to be something that they want to use.
Great, thanks. Amy, you at Eileen Fisher, when we had our prep call, I asked you, well, what does Eileen Fisher, in the big picture, not the woman herself, listen for? What do you listen for? And then you said something about Eileen herself and from day one.
Yes.
You used the phrase from day one.
I did say that. Oh my gosh, what a coincidence. It's true. When Eileen founded the company, one of the core original tenets, really important principles for her was to listen to customers. She listened from day one. The first time she ever displayed the clothing, she listened to the feedback about the clothing, and that has permeated how we connect with customers all the way to now. The people on the floor, on the sales floor in the stores, listen to customers, relay the feedback on a very regular basis. It's very structured back to our product development people, the people who size things, the designers, what sells well, what do they like, what don't they like, what do they want more of. It is a regular feedback system, both through conversation, through email, through phone, social media, everything.
Myriam, at American Express, you focus more on listening to the employees, talking to them, having a dialogue, and learning from them. Talk about how that is, helping make American Express from employee-centric to a better customer-centric company.
Great. Yes. Now I want to add. I think we are in pretty similar model than Ella Fisher in the sense that we are very customer-centric and employees are our customer also, right? So I oversee employee engagement and CSR and sustainability programs. And so we really see them as an extension, right? It's like if they're happy, if we know what they want, what they need, then they can better serve our customers. So we really like try to test to have regular feedback from them. We do have an annual survey. We have like a lot of different ways where they can communicate and send us their feedback. And we also trying to really be authentic and like really listen to like the culture, like understanding what's the culture. So I think that being said, we are definitely a company that is very customer centric. We have over 30,000 professionals that are listening to customers. Every time you call American Express, you can take a survey. So we pay really attention to multiple ways, social media, different channels to really get what the customer wants and then adapt to that.
That's great. Victor, when we spoke about the panel, you mentioned a couple of the clients that Big Spaceship has and how much you guys are listening to customers and reacting and acting on what you're hearing. And one you mentioned was Hasbro. Could you tell us a little bit about how the listening has led Hasbro down a particular lane?
Absolutely, yeah. In the last couple of years, Hasbro, it's been kind of a fascinating shift they've taken where they realized that a lot of their consumers, what they're doing, what we're really paying attention to is not only their customers, but also anybody who plays, and play has a pretty large definition. So what we do is we actually segment it into different types of play, and we put together a lot of panels on social media, and we kind of take into account what everybody's saying in these different panels, and we try to figure out, kind of deduce from what they're talking about, like what is what they're talking about, how does it not only mention Hasbro and talk about what we should be doing next, but how does it mention the whole way that the world is playing right now, and how can Hasbro, whether it's through games or toys or experiences, really shift the way that they're creating products. So we're really taking all the social listening customer, but also kind of generally social listening, and we're directing it right back into the products. We're actually creating products built entirely on that.
Thanks, Victor. So Laura, you shared backstage, this is fascinating, she was Snoopy. On social media. Yes, right there. That was Snoopy. And Woodchuck?
Woodstock.
Woodstock, sorry. It's been a while. So Wanderlust. Your mission and statement and your business strategy are one and the same. Meaning is at your core. How do you listen perhaps differently than an evolving clothing company, a financial services company? Can you talk a little bit about?
Sure. So for those in the room that might not be aware, Wanderlust is a yoga lifestyle company most noted and famous for our yoga and music festivals and yoga events, large scale. So we have 60 events in 20 countries on 5 continents. So we have the distinct privilege to be a container for our community, and we have the opportunity multiple times a year across the world to be able to talk to them in real life and not only engage with them from a brand to consumer perspective, but a person-to-person perspective. And we do that not only at our events, but we do it through surveying. I personally take a couple of weeks every year to reach out to our most loyal consumers, both the folks that have been with us a number of years and the folks that are just starting to gain momentum, to make sure, because they tend to be in two different kinds of, 2 different generations, really make sure that we are understanding what they're getting out of our product, what's resonating with them, what's not, and through a series of structured phone calls and conversations, just to make sure that we continue to be dialed in. And as they continue to evolve from a personal well-being perspective, we evolve with them. So as a result, we're going into our 10th year, and there's been a seismic shift of our product based on the fact that we have been growing as our community has been growing.
Steve, in the labs, you mentioned one particular company that's been spun up called Cherry Pick as an AI machine learning capability to help mine audience, what your audience market trends. Can you talk a little bit about how a specific company can help a bigger company or even a small enterprise that might be in the room?
Sure. So Cherry Pick represents sort of the next wave of customer feedback and understanding what people are talking about when they're talking about brands on social media. So we sort of started with a lot of data collection. We didn't have the tools and capabilities to make any use of that data. So many companies tried to sort of create processes where they could limit the amount of feedback that they were getting just to make use of that data. So this was 10, 15 years ago. I think over the last couple of years, with access to tools like machine learning, artificial intelligence, you can have more data input, understand what that data looks like, and then make decisions. Many examples of what some of the folks on the panel talked about. What cherry pick represents as sort of the next wave is, brands these days should not only care about how people are talking about them. So how does somebody refer to me as a brand on social media? How does somebody tag a photo when my item is in one of their Instagram pictures? But how do they talk about the specific items that I sell in general? Right, so if it's one of their clients of Cherry Pick is Glossier, for example. So what if one of my customers is commenting on, I don't know, let's say another brand. I don't shop too much for fashion brands, but let's say I don't know, is Avon comparable to Glossier? Maybe, I don't know. Let's say Avon. I apologize.
Help him out, Amy.
Eileen Fisher. Let's say Eileen Fisher, right? So if they're talking about Eileen Fisher and saying, well, I wish they did this. Well, if they're a customer of Glossier's, Glossier would want to know that. Glossier wants to know what they're talking about when they're talking about other brands in that context. So that's what Cherry Pick does. There's a combination of artificial intelligence, via natural language processing, natural language understanding, semantic mapping, along with being able to normalize different data sets. So how does my customer data and email relate to my followers on social media and also relate to my competitors' followers on social media? Sort of understand that data in general. So when I sort of say, when you ask a question, the best use cases of artificial intelligence is being able to define the right problem set and problem questions. When I say, how do my customers talk about lipstick, it's showing you not only how they talk about your product, but also in general about how your customers are talking about products amongst your competitors. So it can sort of allow you to understand what are some of the things that you need to be doing as a brand.
Thanks, Steve. One of the things that we touched on when we spoke on the phone in advance of this was the proliferation of causes, of purpose. Forgive me. So I want to ask Myriam, Amy, and Victor about the idea that you could reach purpose overload, and how you deal with it, right? And how do you keep focus, and what's that external message so that it actually does something? I feel like, Lori, you're in a different case. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but does one of you want to jump in on that idea? Amy, you had a great line. I don't want to give it away. You called it a juggling act sometimes, trying to figure out what the messaging is and getting approvals and how to write the press release.
Yeah, I think for any given, just take this duster I'm wearing. This has a story, many, many stories embedded in it. There's a fabric story, there's an eco-fabric aspect to it, there's a design story, there's a message. This is in Morse code. It says the future is female in Morse code. There's a whole line of stories that we could follow that up with. There's a seasonal story, there are other, who made it, all these kinds of stories. And so it is almost every single day, the marketing team, the graphics team are trying to figure out, the writing team, which story is going to resonate most with the customer, what's the timing, et cetera. And, on the flip side of that, many customers just want to come in and get the duster and get out of there as fast as possible. They're on their way someplace, and they don't have time to sit and listen. And if I go and ask many people, I might even do this with you guys, how many people, what are the things that come to mind for you around Eileen Fisher? A lot of people aren't even aware of a lot of the values that we stand for because we have to pick and choose all the time, and people tune into the one thing that they're most interested in and kind of don't pay attention to the rest. So it's a constant juggling act. How are we going to reach everybody?
I think you actually said some women just want to buy a pair of pants.
I changed it because of what I'm wearing.
And Myriam, some people just want to use their points.
Exactly.
So how does Amex juggle?
I think we encounter similar issue, and I would say it's even it aggravated, I think, in the political climate, and like where I believe now taking a stance, comes with also other type of consequences. And so I definitely think not only for our company but for a lot of companies, it's becoming a sensitive issue because people are passionate and they have passions and they want to buy and be associated with companies that are share their values. So how do you kind of like serve a diverse base of customers, and how do you please everybody? I think it's definitely something we struggle, but what we are trying to do is just being authentic about who we are as a brand and really traditionally follow on some of the pillars we always been vocal about and feel like it's something we
So how does an Amex, and I think you play a role in that in your position, how do you achieve authenticity?
Again, it goes back to our employee and really being, we are a 100, almost 70 years old company. So I think we have values that we stand by that are called the Blue Box value, and they have not really changed. Some of the language have changed in the last 170 years, but I think that notion of ethics, diversity, inclusion, and care for community are things that are been around for many years, and that around also that notion of service and being there for the community is really something that we're trying to capitalize and be truthful about.
So Victor, you mentioned a couple of your clients, YouTube, JetBlue, not necessarily what we think of first when we think of purpose.
Yeah.
How does that work from your perspective and the work you guys do for them?
Absolutely, and I think it's larger than those brands even. I think what's interesting, as you were saying, is everybody wants a sense of purpose right now, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen the data where every generation answers this more and more towards purpose, where if you compare, baby boomers to Gen X to millennials, but then especially Gen Z, the numbers are insane in terms of like how many of them only want to work at a company where they feel like they have purpose and meaning in their life. They only want to purchase products that resonate with their purpose. What I've seen over and over again, and I've really seen in the last 2 years, somebody on my team gave it a really good name. They called it performative wokeness. The idea that brands more and more right now...
Say that again.
Performative wokeness. I love it. And the idea there is that every brand right now is trying to be the most woke brand, right? The brand that has the most purpose behind it, the brand that is putting that purpose out into the world. And there are a lot of brands that do intrinsically have that as part of their DNA, right? Especially newer brands, but you get brands like JetBlue, Wanderlust, a lot of brands we're talking about, they do really have that. But then every other brand is trying to catch on, right? Trust is eroding, as we know. It's funny, we're in a strange moment where trust is not only eroding for brands, but it's also eroding for social platforms. So they don't trust the platforms that your messages are on either. So all of a sudden there's this huge trust issue. So every brand is trying to figure out how do we get more trust. Then there's the brands that have the purpose, but then there's all the other brands who are doing what we're calling performative wokeness. We're trying to push it out. And then I think people are very savvy. Consumers understand when a brand is pandering to them and trying to be the most woke brand out there. So I guess that's how I see it more than anything is we try, I know at Big Spaceship, we're really trying to align ourselves with brands that do have purpose and they have it in their DNA. Hasbro's been most ethical company for the last 15 years. JetBlue has it in their DNA as well. But I think more than anything, it's quite a challenge. I think it's a very big challenge to new brands. I think every new brand coming out right now has to have purpose in its DNA, and you have to bake it in from day one, or it's really it's not going to work right now.
Thanks, Victor. I just want to congratulate you. You speak fast and you speak well. You should be in fast company. Laura, you spoke. You used the phrase qualitative listening. Mm-hmm. So I just want to spin it from the counter side. Can we listen too much, and how do we get listening wrong?
So we might be speaking fast on this panel, but listening obviously is it's an art form. Sure, you could listen too much, but I think it all really boils down to, and we have to back up a little bit, just to kind of reiterate on what Victor said. I think what brands are doing right, the ones that are doing purpose-driven in the space, the ones that are doing that right, know two things. They know themselves intrinsically, and they know their customers intrinsically. And they've spent the work, and they've put in the sweat equity to really know those two things and visually and verbally articulate those two things. They try to be who they are to who they are for. And that, along with being purpose-driven and identifying the purposes that relate back to your causes in that way, takes a tremendous amount of courage. So I think one can do too much listening if they are not deep-rooted in who they are and who their customer is. But if those two things are aligned, the listening comes naturally because it's symbiotic. One is not without the other.
Coming off that point, Laura, Steve, you had used a phrase, you called listening a necessity to survival in business today. Mm-hmm. Could you, I'm sure everyone could answer that kind of for themselves. Can you just give us a tight answer on just why and how critical it is for a startup, legacy company, what have you?
Well, I think it goes back to the point that a few of the speakers mentioned that if you don't know what your customers want, it's very hard to develop a product that's sort of tailored for them. I think the general notion from the startup ecosystem is you have a finite amount of resources, and you have to pick and choose which markets you pursue, which customers you pursue. And as brands try new strategies where they're starting to take a little bit more risk, larger companies are starting to take a little bit more risk. Sort of, what Wanderlust is doing is trying new and different things to see how you can expand as a brand. Many larger companies are trying to follow suit where they're experimenting with new products, new techniques. I think the mentality of failing fast and being okay to fail is dependent on how quickly you can get that customer feedback loop developed and quality data back on what's working and what's not working.
I appreciate that. A couple things I just want to touch on, throw it out to anybody. The quiet customer. How do you listen to the quiet customer? Can that man or woman be as influential as the loud customer, the loud voice? You're shaking there, your head.
Yes, I'm agreeing. Yes, it's interesting. So what we do, something that we've been playing with a little bit, I think it's interesting when you mentioned cherry pick, because I think a lot of agencies right now are trying to figure out similar, whether they're using cherry pick or they're trying to create tools in-house. I think there's an arms race for data right now, right? So every brand is trying to get, we have all these direct-to-consumer brands, we have all of these agencies and different, trying to figure out how do we help our partners be smart about data, listen to all the customers. So one thing that we've been playing with very recently is the idea of listening to the quiet customer. So kind of tiering out your customers. You have the customers who are very vocal, and it's very easy to listen to them on social media, or whether they might be speaking to you directly. You have the customers who are a little bit quieter, and you have to look a little bit deeper to find out what they're talking about. You have to go to forums or things like that. And then you have the quiet customer, and I think we haven't developed this yet, but what we've been talking about is there are quiet customers who only communicate, at least when it comes to social, in liking things, in joining things, in creating, in becoming a member of whether it's kind of like a Twitter group or whatever it might be. And so what we're trying to do is find ways to find those quiet customers and listen in those more subtle ways and then see what that leads to. So it's a little bit more difficult to create products based off that so far, but we are starting to get a sense of how do we listen to customers who are not putting themselves out there all the way, but are kind of doing some of these more introverted. I think in the last couple of years, I know Facebook's had a big problem of this where people are posting less and less to social media and they're lurking more and more. So it becomes, now that there's more lurkers on social media, how do you get value as a brand, as a company from the lurkers?
I don't think there's such thing as a quiet customer.
Yeah.
I don't think it exists. I think being a quiet customer is self-selecting who you are as an individual. There's research that was done out of Stanford, Berkeley, where they train machine learning algorithms to do psychoanalytic profiles of people based on 50 to 70 word samples. And I would argue that every single person in this room has at least 50 to 70 words that they've published online somewhere. So I think just the idea of you not being able to create a persona on somebody who doesn't post a lot is something that may have been true a couple of years ago. I don't think it's true today. And I think that sort of notion of not posting a lot, liking, and lurking is a profile that fits a specific persona within a brand.
This is for Amy, Myriam, and Laura. The Havas group has been doing for last 8 or so years a meaningful brands study, and they coined the phrase return on meaning as trying to create metrics for the for-profit world through purpose. How do you measure it, analyze it, report up to the top floor, the corner office, the corner cube, whatever it is, the person you report to? What are your returns on meaning metrics? Laura, start.
I mean, we exist I mean, honestly, that's our return.
Yes.
Our return is that we are creating meaningful products for people that that do resonate with them personally, and now with some of our newer events professionally, and we see continued growth year over year. I mean, that's really all the proof that we need. Putting more out into the universe and having it gobbled up is certainly the highest metric. We don't do anything qualitative around that. I think that, and we do a lot of qualitative things, like we believe in the power of data, but I think maybe sometimes brands want to, because they want to go faster and they want to learn as quickly as possible, they might rely too much on leaning into that data. And I couldn't encourage more. Our success has come from maintaining a human relationship with our community. And I mean, obviously, as you scale, that becomes more and more challenging. But finding opportunities to reconnect qualitatively, as I said, and really do that homework. You hear, you can then certainly, from a qualitative perspective, hear the return from those customers, in our case, with just consistently life-changing experiences. So.
And if I may, I would echo that, because one of the things American Express is well known in terms of purpose is we launched the Shop Small movement about 8 years ago. We'll be celebrating our 9th year anniversary here in the US, and it has become a global movement, which is really a day created to support small businesses. Internally, I think that's one of the things that have been actually attracting people to come for our company, the fact that we care about job creation, the viability of local economy, and enrich lives of people in general. And I think it's also been something that we try to reflect. We actually launched a new brand platform called the Powerful Backing, because we listen to our customers and we understand that idea of relationship and that idea of there is an interconnection between work and life. Now it's more blurry. We actually had a customer study that says that 50% of people think now the two are really intertwined. So how do we respond to that? I think that idea of now everything is blurry and everybody's looking in purpose in their life, through their work. So, being able, our own existence, as you were saying, is kind of the metric. Same internally, we have a lot of programs, and some of the most successful, and how we measure that is our sustainability platform program. That's where we have we have a social media intranet platform where a lot of people can comment, and the articles that are the most successful are the one talking about the work we do around plastic pollution or sustainability work, or when we have a full blow up volunteer program. And those are the ones that have the most comments. So we that's how our top leaderships know that it's really something that is very valuable.
Amy?
So there's so many different ways I can answer that, but just very high level, we measure so many things. We measure our environmental impact across our various aspects of our product, our practices, et cetera. We measure our social impact, the well-being of workers in our supply chain, et cetera. We also have been tinkering with a quadruple bottom line business model, which is in kind of evolution and probably will move into something slightly different. We're a B corporation. There's a B impact assessment. There's all kinds of measures. In terms of customers and how do we know what's resonating with the customers, we have regular reports on which eco product is selling best. What resonates in terms of social media, how many likes, how many responses, how many new engagements around different kinds of social media posts related to environmental or social messaging or other kinds of values. So there are all different ways that we measure.
We will take a couple questions, so if you get your thoughts collected, and I'll throw to you in a little bit. Maybe raise your hand in advance. But I wanted to mention, I just got it, so I'm still reading it, a book by Fred Kaufman, the author of Conscious Business. He's written a new one, The Meaning Revolution. And in it, he talks about material incentives account for perhaps 15% of employee motivation. The other 85% is driven by our need to belong, by the conviction that what we do day in and day out matters. Now, sometimes I just want to have a cup of coffee and not have my socks stand for some political or cause thing, but you guys all work in and around this really rich, purposeful space. How does it make your personal and professional life different, better, fuller? or do you have the same headaches we all do with too much email? Myriam?
I mean, I used to work in a different company at L'Oreal. I would tell you that has been life-changing for me to start working at American Express. When you have nearly 90% of employees that would recommend it as a great place to work, I think it summarizes it well. You know, I'm not lying when I feel like everybody is like willing to just create something positive, and it literally like makes the tons of emails so much easier than working for a company that you know where you feel like your colleagues maybe don't share the same value than you. So,
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, look, the environment at the Future Labs is very unique. You know, every day we have founders who have to convince employees to give up, much higher salaries that they can get in the public and private markets to come work for them, especially in an age of AI where most of our companies are commercializing AI products. The engineers that they're hiring can get paid 5x what their startups are paying. And that transaction and convincing somebody that your culture is unique, that the mission that you're pursuing is grand and has purpose, is something that I've been fortunate to sort of experience firsthand, and it's something that we try to embody at the operations of the Future Labs as well. So we have as much to learn from the companies as they have from us, and it's been unique.
I started my career out in the nonprofit field, and for the sole purpose of trying to find meaning in my work. And when I transitioned into Eileen Fisher 25 years ago, I couldn't believe how much more soul-satisfying my work is, how much more rewarding it is. So there's life after nonprofit.
And you're hosting your great new store on Bergen Street in Cobble Hill.
Yes.
Is hosting the post-event reception tonight.
Yep.
And it's all new, and it's a manifestation
Brand new,
of all
3
we've been
weeks
talking
old.
about, right?
Yeah.
That was a mini commercial for
Thank you.
Victor?
I came from teaching and then documentary filmmaking, so going into the world of brands was strange for me at first. And I think what's interesting in any agency, there's ebb and flow to everything you do there, obviously. So I think you really see in different teams and different parts of the agency the ebb and flow of purpose. So you have, when we were working for YouTube for their Get Out the Vote campaign in 2016, and that was one of the most purposeful, purpose-driven, feeling that we're making an impact. And we have these campaigns like that where everyone, you see the surge of energy, and then you see somebody transition from that into a less purpose-driven company. And absolutely, it's an energy that you see people ride and ebb and flow.
Laura, you ooze purpose.
Can't you see it? Probably my biggest takeaway, because anytime I'm interviewing someone to bring them into the team, they ask, well, why do you love to work here? And at the core of it, it's because having the responsibility of maintaining authentic and authentic connection and a high sense of integrity, having the kind of like vulnerability of an in-person large community, it really keeps me honest. And there's a sense of owning, of owing that back to the community. So I genuinely love the fact that I have to show up as a better human every day, not only to prop the brand up in an appropriate way, but to be there for my team and be there for our leaders and, be there for the community as a whole.
That's great. Question, right here.
Hi.
Fire away.
So I'm curious, like you have been talking a lot about listening to the customer, and I'm wondering about listening for what the customer doesn't know they want yet. And you talked a little bit around how you can listen into other brands, right? Cherry pick or the playing that Victor was talking about. But how do you listen for something that doesn't yet exist? And what do you do when that thing may seem at first in conflict with what the customer is asking for?
Hand raiser, somebody?
So yeah, I mean, this is a very, very common problem when you're doing customer validation, not just for large companies, but especially for smaller companies. Henry Ford had the very famous quote, "If I would have listened to my customers, I would have had to build a faster horse." But in reality, he did build a faster horse. He understood the purpose behind the feedback. So I think listening to your customers isn't just listening to the words that they're saying, but it's understanding the meaning behind why they're facing some of these problems, why their feedback is either, the explicit or implicit meaning behind their feedback, and sort of trying to understand where there's correlation with other sort of responses that you've gotten, not just what you're saying in the words.
Myriam.
And if I may add, I think I would extend also the definition of customers. I think what's really important is understanding the trends and the expectation of all your other stakeholders, right? Understanding how all of that can really, at the end, be creating innovative products and services. So that notion of stakeholders is really important.
Yeah, I think, honestly, similar to what you're saying, I think that half of it is social listening, but half of what we're doing for a lot of our brands that we have this kind of work with, like for Hasbro, for example, or YouTube, is half of it is trend watching, because you have to be watching both sides of it, what they're saying, but what's the world, how are they evolving, and then also finding interesting adjacencies to what's happening. So rather than just focusing on people in your tribe, what are interesting adjacent tribes that might be saying things that might kind of ricochet back into what you want.
I spent most of my career at Time Inc. I don't think we listened well enough to all the signals. It's no more for those of you not in the media world. A question out there. Speak up loud and clear and fast.
Yes, Amy and Hexter, the question is for Amy. I'm just curious. I didn't know you were a B Corp, and I'm curious to know what a quadruple bottom line might look like. I know you're playing around with it, but I'm just really curious. I thought it was a fascinating concept.
I figured somebody might be piqued, their interest might be piqued by it. Really simply financial, environmental, two social. One is the well-being of our employees, and the other is the well-being of the people in our supply chain.
I can't thank you five enough. I felt your spirit and purpose on the phone. Now I've seen it live and in person. It's amazing. I don't know if you're going to stick around, but I think somebody at each table wants to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.